One of the readers says, as a Dodger fan, all I can say is thank you, Cubs.
Well, guess what? I want you, Dodger fan. I want you and your team. We're avenging '08. We're going to sweep you guys. As a complete, as last night, I was like, that's it. We're done. It's over.
That sounds like a wager to me.
Soon.
Let's see. Chris also asks, do you guys find yourself leaning forward on the standing desks when you're standing? I do, because I end up, like when I'm doing this kind of thing, when I'm teaching or presenting, I'll lean a little bit, but most of the time when I'm coding, I'm stepping back, I'm like standing back and just resting hands out there.
Yep, nope.
Yeah.
Mainly because I'm really worried that it's not as stable as yours, Brent, because it's only 2. So I think you've got the 4, right? You've got the 4 legs?
Big, and this thing weighs easily 250, 300 pounds. It's ridiculous.
So you could bench it. You could bench your table. Yeah.
The table could bench me. Yes. So we also have a question. Which one of you guys is presenting at PASS and on which subjects? Well, there's only me this week, or only me this year. So it's just me, and I am presenting 2 things. How to think like the engine, which is my introduction to SQL Server internals. That one is the first session after the keynote in the largest room. So I'm like, this ought to be, it's either going to be hilarious or awful. It's either going to be awesome or truly epic.
Hilariously awful. It's good.
Incredibly bad. I had one SP Blitz session one year, and it was truly like there was maybe 1/4 of the people were, or 1/4 of the seats were full, but it was because it was a huge room, just monstrous room, and I'm like, really, this doesn't make sense. And so I'm doing that one, and then I'm doing career internals, 500 level guide to career internals, which is like how to hack your way through your career so that you don't end up in a dead end job like the 2 yo-yos who are sitting, here on the screens next to me. Might as well go ahead and you guys are starting to throw questions in. If you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put those in. We go first come, first serve, so we'll go down through the list, and anybody who gets it in, knock yourself right out. First one is kind of a doozy. Kendra asked, we have 310 terabytes of databases on 30 instances, and unfortunately some of these are antiques. 10 of them are SQL Server 2000, and 20 of them are SQL Server 2005.
You're opening a SQL museum?
It's a big one, too. The Louvre SQL Museum. Golly. Usually these are the kinds of, when you get big databases, hundreds of terabytes worth of stuff, you want to get those off old versions as fast as you can. It says these databases need to be migrated to SQL 2012. They're critical in terms of business operations, and we're trying to get to less licenses and minimum downtime. I advise to go with side-by-side migration. Would you guys suggest the best approach, in place or side-by-side? Wow. So say, Eric, someone handed you 300 terabytes worth of data on SQL 2000 and 2005. What would be how would you approach that?
Run screaming into the night. No, the first thing I think is weird about that is that they're only moving to 2012.
Oh, that's a great point.
Like, why not one of the newer versions?
You know why, but it's kind of hidden in that question too. If they're so conservative that they're only wanting to go to 2000 or 2000, or they're only on 2000, 2005 today, they probably are like, I don't know about that newfangled 2014.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I would not do an in-place upgrade because the chances are that hardware is old as dirt and possibly older. I think, it's going to sound weird because I almost never vote for this, but I think this might be a good case to address part of the question about licensing. This might be a good case for virtualization, where you could license enterprise at the host level and spin up as many hosts as you want and sort of have them vary in the hardware department as to how much they actually use. And I think from there I would because at this point any newer hardware is going to be an improvement.
Yes.
Like, there's no way that, the virtualization layer is going to be an issue.
A noticeable problem.
Yeah. Like, anything is going to be better. than what you're on now. So I would so like depending on your licensing, if you're on standard, that kind of falls apart a little bit because you have to license standard guests per guest, not at the host level. But if you're on enterprise licensing, that's what I would do. As far as moving the stuff over, that depends on what kind of storage it's on. If it's on the SAN, you can do some SAN magic. If it's not, then you're going to probably have to log ship or something to move it on over, because 2000, and depending on which service pack of 2005 you're on, you're not going to have a lot of other options.
Yeah, I like all those thoughts. I love the virtualization angle. It's really, really sharp. Let's see, next
I
up,
didn't say Azure because I'm not that cool.
You should just put the whole thing on a, yeah.
Well, I was just like, how are you going to get 310 gigs to the cloud, Eric? You're not. Terabytes, rather, terabytes.
Yeah. Let's see, next one, would changing your primary key from GUID to datetime see a performance benefit?
No.
Wow. So I could imagine a case where it would. Imagine that you were, and I'm really like reaching here, imagine that you only did selects with a filter on the where by time. That's like the only edge case. But yeah, that is I would steer back and go, what's the performance problem you're trying to solve? Drill deeper into things like wait stats to figure out whether or not, but that changing the primary key, that gives me heartburn right there. But Eric, if you were going to, or actually Richie, if you're picking primary keys for a table, what do you go by there?
I like identities. That's typically what my default is. But if you're doing identities, you also want to take a look at your natural keys and place them as alternate keys as well, where applicable, right? So not every table is going to have a natural key in it, but you definitely want to say, hey, does this have a natural key or not? And if it does, create that as an alternate key, and then when you do that, you minimize your duplicate so you can get in the table. And by the way, changing your primary keys shouldn't change any of your performance anyway. It's the clustered index you should be worried about anyway, not your primary keys.
Got an interesting one. Any suggestions for a first-time Pass Summit attendee?
That was my question. I'm sorry.
Is this your first time going to Pass? It is your first time. Oh,
no one else had ever sent me, surprisingly.
Oh man. Let's see here. So mine, and I just got done writing our weekly newsletter for next Monday, and it's full of tips. So my big ones are stay hydrated, go drink water after every session, because it's very easy to slip in the I'm just going to drink coffee and Coke, and then next thing you know, you feel like hell by day 2. So drink water after every session. If you find someone that you like talking to, don't be afraid to just skip sessions and keep talking to them. When you're bored, go hang out in the Sheraton lobby. Doesn't matter whether you're staying there or not. There are coffee bars and lobby bars and just couch areas. Wander around through there like you're looking for someone, because that's exactly what you're doing. And when you see someone you recognize, you just go stand near them. It is not creepy at all. That's what all of us do when we're down there. It's just because you're going to see so many people that you recognize. I was like the first year, I'm like, oh my God, Lynchy, I know that guy.
We played a Pandemic last year in the Sheraton lobby.
Wow, gathered a crowd, I would assume, too.
Well, not as you would think, but because there was other people there doing their other things. But we had people poking over like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah,
during the
this
world
is
of
important.
disease.
I wonder if we should set up a game night, a pandemic game night in the lobby. That'd be cool. Cards Against Humanity. I have the sequel Against Humanity game set from Dev Nambi. It's quite enjoyable. Let's see. Fellow Human asks, should sleeping SIDs hold on to memory? We were having memory pressure on our server, and Idera SQL DM showed 8 or 10 connections sleeping with around 2 gigs of memory usage each. We restarted the app service with the sleeping connections, and 18 gigs freed up. Is that a bug, or is it supposed to happen for some reason? And I'm on SQL 2008 SP3. What are reasons why a sleeping SPID would be using memory? I got temp tables is the one that I'm thinking. Like if you create temp tables, that'll do it, because they'll get cached in RAM just like regular database pages would. What else?
Well, I mean, my concern with the sleeping SPIDs is more that someone kind of boffed connection pooling. Like they didn't set a timeout or a disconnect if you haven't done anything in X amount of time.
Well, and if they're using RAM, then and if that means they probably do have, I'm just guessing, tempdb objects, then they probably have other goofs in their code too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like someone actually did begin, maybe someone actually did begin tran and then didn't
commit anything
down. Yeah, because that would be, I mean, at least part of a reason why the temp tables would still be up and running.
Before you kill a query, if you're looking at a list of sessions in like SP who is active, is there anything that you look at before you kill them?
No, I just haul off and start shooting things.
Good answer. Good answer. Call us for consulting, ladies and gentlemen. We do it live.
No, I like to. Well, I mean, if I can, I like to use like the fancy like get out or command and stuff for SP who is active to see if it has done any transaction. Oh, well, not for that. There's the get trans info where you can see if it's done anything with the transaction log, and you can see if it's written anything. So if you kill it, it has to roll back, and who knows what you're rolling back. So important things to look at is if that query has made modifications or simply just done some selects and used temp tables.
Nate says, we tested a pretty darn legacy app environment that was on SQL 2005, and we upgraded it to 2016, and it worked fine. Listen, Nate, you're lucky. Not everyone is as lucky as you are. I do appreciate that, though, but you were lucky. Next one. Is there a way to estimate backup compression savings without actually creating a backup? Am I the only one who's played around with this? So you can, there's a stored procedure for table compression. I don't think there is for backup compression without taking a backup. And I'm trying to think if you did the backup to null, if that gives you the compressed size or not. I think it does. So if you do a backup to file and you put in for the file name NUL, just NUL, not two L's, just one L, then that actually takes a backup and doesn't write it. The problem with that is that it is a real backup, so it will mess up your differential bitmap. Make sure you're only doing a copy-only backup. Next question, locked pages in memory. Is it still a good idea for SQL servers where the OS is 2012 or plus? I just read an article where Brent is against setting it with newer servers. So now I'm going to go answer this. All right, so here's the deal. So the two people in the community who are kind of pro and con with this, Jonathan Cahias is very pro like linked pages in memory. So if you search for Jonathan Cahias, and it's spelled just like it sounds, Jonathan Cahias, locked pages in memory, he has a blog post that's very lengthy, and it explains both his point of view and my point of view. Jonathan's brilliant. I love the guy to death. So then go down and read the first set of comments. Read like the first 4 or 5 comments. And one of the comments that Jonathan writes is, under certain circumstances, if the OS can't free up memory fast enough, you will experience a Windows crash due to memory pressure. So I'm just not pro setting blue screen of death settings. I'd just rather avoid that. Go find out what's really causing SQL Server to swap to disk and go fix that. Let's see, fellow human says, I got this vendor trigger and I need to update a column, but I don't want the trigger to fire. Do I have any options beside rewriting the trigger? Oh, that's kind of cool. Can you disable triggers?
I think you can.
I think you just disable them.
Yeah. I was trying to, because like I know that there are some. No, that wouldn't even work. Never mind. Because I know in bulk insert, I think you can like ignore triggers and constraints, but I can't think of a way to do that with like an update.
Yeah, I would just disable the trigger.
Disable trigger. Oddly enough, that's this T-SQL for it. Disable trigger.
Oh. There you go. Nate says this may be a bit oddball, which is our favorite kind of question, but do you guys, particularly Richie or Joris, either one, have any thoughts on database version control? Have there been any tools you found that work well for that, or what does the SQL environment need to look like to be ready for that?
Ooh, man, that's such a hard thing to do. Redgate has a tool that some people really like. Some people don't like the cost. That does a pretty good job of doing source controlling some of your database stuff. Also, I've used the DB projects with some success as well, and you could hook that up to whatever source control that you have handy, preferably not VSS. And I think between the two of them, you could come up with whichever road you go, they're pretty good solutions. I like DB projects if I was going greenfield, but testing your environment and how much funding you have for these type of things.
Angie says, maybe we shouldn't be playing Cards Against Humanity in the lobby.
And why not?
Funny thing
all
is,
adults.
it probably isn't even going to be the most offensive thing that happens inside the Sheraton lobby. Let's see, next one. Have you noticed that some SQL counters no longer work? For example, under SQL Server Resource Pool Stats, CPU usage target % is always 0. I don't think any of us have noticed that because we don't look at Perpmon that closely, but that's the great kind of thing that you put under connect.microsoft.com. Connect.microsoft.com is where you go file bugs, and that could certainly help you out a lot there. Angie says there's probably going to be at least one kid at the Sheraton. Angie, you're pretty young. You might even qualify as a kid.
She gets a free Sunday.
Yeah. And Adam Mechanic, man, the first time I found his age, I was like, now this is a while ago now, but I'm like, you're how old and you're already this smart? I think he was like 32 when I met him, and I'm like, this should be against the law. The guy's just way too smart. Jonathan Gahias as well. Oh my God, the guy looks like he's 14 and he's a rocket surgeon. Amazing. Next question. I'm testing always-on availability groups. First off, you're off to a great start because you spelled it correctly with the spacing and everything. You're practically a guru on that. And I'm having issues connecting to my databases after failover because the users have lost their link. Have you come across this before, and how have you handled this? Eric, have you had to play around with troubleshooting AG failovers?
Not where I had the outside users losing their link, no.
Yeah. The problem is typically, depends on, are you failing over inside the same data center or off to another data center? If there's another IP address involved, troubleshooting multi-subnet failover can be a little bit tricky. We actually cover this in our senior DBA class, and it's a little bit beyond what I can answer in a Q&A, but search for the term multi-subnet failover equals true. This is the big one, and it's enabled by default in the current versions of .NET. I want to say it's 4.6.2. I can never quite remember.
Sounds good.
Let's see here. Next up, there's a question that I feel dirty even saying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
My manager is running a database in SQL Server 7 and somehow hasn't failed horribly, and if he says it ain't broke, why fix it? What is the best way to go about convincing him to upgrade to a newer version of SQL?
Break it.
I love it. Yeah, sure, right? Yeah.
You got to fix it now.
Yes.
I mean, that's my big question. It's like, okay, it's not broken now, but when it does break, how are you going to get support on that?
And how are you going to
Microsoft
get
isn't
data
going to
out?
pick up that call.
Oh. That's 3 full versions out. I mean, 2000 isn't supported, 2005 isn't supported.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a runway.
Yeah. I mean, you would have to first upgrade it to another unsupported version before you could get to a supported version. Like you would have to put it on 2005 and then 2008, I think. Right? Yeah.
I mean, going back to my old project management days, as much as I try to block that out, I mean, you could create a risk mitigation document and saying, hey, these are the risks that are involved, data corruption, and then you could say, hey, this is the high, medium, or low. If what's the likelihood for this to happen, and then what's the mitigation? How are we going to fix it, and how long is that going to take? And you could just estimate all these things. Just say these are the things that could go wrong, and this is how long it's going to take to fix. Right, and then this is the probability of this happening, and just say, hey, by the way, I made a risk mitigation plan. Why don't you go ahead and sign that? So just in case something happens with this database, we all know what we're going to do, and you approve that it will take 3 or 4 weeks that the systems be down, and you're okay with that. And he'll probably take a look at that. It's like, oh, that's unacceptable. It's like, well, if you spend a little money now, these risks go away.
And you don't have to email his manager. Like don't try to jump up the chain or anything like that. It's not going to make you any friends.
Yeah.
You know what else
go
might
right
help
to
is
the
if
boss.
you
Go, your boss, the
to
manager.
the president. I mean, look, what I've run into in the past is that people don't want to necessarily get on a new version of SQL. They don't necessarily want to, have to test the app or the code to move up, but they are okay with virtualizing that server. So you could just P to V that older server, put it on newer hardware, and get at least some of the risk mitigated, but not have to go through the full breadth of testing the application and the code. Just get it someplace a little bit safer than where it is, and just let it keep running on what it is. Because chances are, if it's been on SQL 7 that long, no one really cares about it.
Related question there, does anyone have a standardized timeline for adoption of new SQL Server versions? Like how long does it take, 6 months or a year? You know what I would do is I would go to spotlightessentials.com. Spotlightessentials.com is Dell's free monitoring product, or Dell Software's free monitoring product, but they have this really cool collective IQ or collective knowledge page that lists statistics about all the versions of SQL Server out there. And it'll tell you which versions are the most popular. It's going to be kind of shocking how slow adoption really is, because adoption's expensive.
Mm-hmm. It's usually new hardware. Actually, there's a follow-up to that. And another fellow human says, first good service pack is out. But, not no more.
What does good service pack mean?
And on top of that, how long are you going to have to wait for that service pack? Because Microsoft is moving away from the service pack servicing model. You're going to get a lot of cumulative updates. You're not going to get those service packs too often. So what's the first good cumulative update?
The real question is, will SSMS work when you connect to the updated database?
SSMS will never work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but 2012 SP1 and 2014 SP1 had some horrific bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, JH asks, when I'm performance tuning a complex query, what are the first things that I should look for? And do the high cost portions in the plan, something like 80% or 90% items, is that somewhere that I should start or not necessarily so?
It's a good starting place. I don't think it's a bad starting place at all. It may not be where you end up, like if you're troubleshooting a high cost query and you've done some finagling and you still all your costs are still on an index seek, I don't really know where you'd go from there. So maybe the highest cost it's a good place to a good place to start. Maybe not where you end up though.
Let's see, next question. I'm trying to create a copy of a 2012 SQL Server that has always-on replication. You got to be really careful when you say things like this because replication has several different meanings. I can't quite tell by the question if you mean like transactional replication or just always-on replication. And I'm trying to restore a copy of the production to a point in time using transaction log backups on the dev server, but I keep getting LSN errors. Good God, what are you trying to do?
You should have read this question first.
Yes, I should have read this. So you can't merge backups from two different servers, like production and development. Even if they started from the same place, once they kind of fork off, you're screwed. So sad how that works.
Mm-hmm. You are forked.
You are forked. JH says, is there anything to be aware or consider when I'm upgrading from SQL 2008 to 2016? No, not at all. Next question.
No breaking changes whatsoever.
There's a really good technical upgrade guide if you search for SQL Server Technical Upgrade Guide, and I think it's still for 2014. I don't think they have the 2016 one out yet. It's like 300 pages of stuff that you want to consider.
One thing that I really like checking is you can straight up look at Microsoft lists breaking changes between versions. So if you want to go ahead and if you just search like SQL Server breaking changes, you get a guide that has stuff that breaks between versions. I don't think it skips versions, so you couldn't do like a 2008 R2 to 2012 or 2016 comparison, but you can at least get breaking changes between some versions, which might be helpful because you could figure some stuff out real quick.
Related question, are there any resources or guidelines to upgrade from SQL Server 2000 to 2016? Ha 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 ha.
Pray.
Yeah, no, because that 2000 has been so far out of support for so long. This is one of the reasons that Microsoft only supports so many versions. They gave you guidelines during current versions. What you're probably going to have to do is look for old documentation from like 2008 for when people were moving from 2000 to 2008 and make that jump first, and then later make the jump from 2008 to 2016. Also notes that the vendor's out of business and no support anymore. This is... yeah.
You know what I'd do?
Yeah.
I would just spin up a dev server. Do my. I think you're gonna have to hit a version in between 2000 and 2016, so they can get a clean upgrade. You can at least skip 2 versions ahead. And I would just battle it out, get it on 2016, and see what happens.
And 2016 will let you restore databases from 2005, which is kind of cool. So it allows huge jumps. I just don't think you can go from 2000 to 2016.
I mean, that was like before Nickelback. Like, oh my gosh, seriously.
Wow, man, that's like almost Janet Jackson kind of when she was good.
It was like Nipplegate, right? I mean, jeez.
This one, I'm going to have to take a deep breath in order to read it. And I've read it, and it's awesome, and I just have to share it. AG cluster, SQL Server 2014 Enterprise, experienced storage failure on the first node. So the databases became suspect on my primary node, then started going to fail over onto the second node. I had to do a manual failover with data loss. So my databases are online on my secondary node. CheckDB was run and returned no error. I'm assuming that you mean that you ran CheckDB on the first node. Believe me, when you have storage failure, you won't be running CheckDB like it's a free party and everybody's invited. What is the risk of data corruption of the recovered databases? Is the AG failover with data loss safe when I have storage failure? Man, when you got storage failure, ain't nothing safe. Nothing. Nothing safe at all. Just go run CheckDB. Run CheckDB. I would do with extended logical checks as well. It's going to take a little extra time, but that also catches other things. But normally, even just physical only will catch, the physical only switch will catch that.
Yeah, if it was a bad storage failure and you got corruption because of that, physical only would throw a whole mess of errors. You're gonna have some problems.
Mm-hmm. And you'll know quick. And I would also say too, whenever you do that failover, before you fail back to something that had extreme storage problems, load test the bejesus out of it. Really load test it for a while. Do several repeated database restores and CheckDBs just to make sure continuous writes work.
I might even tear that AG down and start over again. That's how terrified I am of storage failures. We're going to do something fresh here. That's not good. Yeah, absolutely. This is like what we were talking about. This is one of those reasons where I pray that if I ever need another job after this, I am working with something in the cloud, RDS or Azure database where I don't have to worry about this stuff. I can just say, nope, we're gonna make some indexes today. Oh man, that's awful.
It seems so cool when you read the brochures. There's all these new features that come out in SQL Server, and I'm like, oh, that looks so awesome. But then when you have to manage it afterwards, it's like, indexes and query tuning are really pretty awesome. Now let's see here. What is the best way to keep logins in sync? SQL logins in sync between 2 servers, like live and test.
I've never had to automate that. I know Robert Davis has a thing that helps you script things out. Let me think of the keywords to search that. So this is like Robert Davis script logins, right?
Totally. Yeah,
okay.
That'll do it.
That'll work. Yeah, so I would go there and just kind of look for a way to weaponize that into something that checks between servers. You might have to do something dirty with one servers to do it, but if you wanted to automate it, works. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about source control, and that's something you could source control, especially from test, right? Test server, you probably don't want all your production people on it, so script out your test users, and whoever needs to access it, go from there.
Well, I mean, that brings up something else, though. It's like, do you really want to be doing that? Because you might have given devs some advanced permissions on that dev server that you don't want them inheriting on the prod server. Especially because, they might be forgetful about where SSMS is connected and do something wacky.
I've never dropped a users table. more than once?
I have never overwritten a production database
that anyone could ever prove. Someone also pipes in SSIS task, and I like that. If we were playing keyboard bingo, you totally would have gotten a box for that one. But if you're an SSIS person, that's the kind of thing that makes sense. The one thing I would always want to say is it's kind of like PowerShell. Just because you know the hammer really well doesn't mean everyone else on the team does. So just try to write things that everyone's going to be able to reuse.
I love to hate SSIS. Is that?
I
know
SSIS.
SSIS.
I'm like, ooh, that looks kind of cool over there. I used to do that. Yeah, I remember that. We were recently told to migrate to net backup for using backups. So far, things look good, but do you have any horror stories about using net backup? And in order to avoid trash talking any particular third-party tool, I would say, do you have any horror stories about just using any other third-party tool for backups?
Now, so is net backup taking is that like an overlay for native SQL backups, or is that doing snapshots?
It'll do both. It'll either do snapshots or it'll do full and transaction log backups.
Okay, so as far as third-party tools go, I have one that I really didn't like that I won't say the name of because we are recorded and transcribed these days. But there was one that I had a really negative experience, several very negative experiences with, and one of the problems that I had with it was that when it was taking backups, it would create and destroy these virtual devices, which are just GUIDs. So it would back up to a device, and it would name that device a GUID, and then it would destroy that when it was done. So what bothered me as a DBA was that if this backup tool server went down, there was no way for me to script out a restore on my own, like outside of the backup tool, to do a restore from something because, A, that backup device doesn't exist. I don't know how to map it. I don't know how to do anything with it. So I'm just like, if this backup tool goes down, I am hosed. And so I want in an ideal world, I want a little bit more control over how backups get taken than that.
Agreed. Someone says, I've always wanted one of those Brent Ozar Unlimited mugs. I'm jealous. Yep. And this is an old school one.
It is. Yeah, look at that.
That's the contraband one.
Contraband.
Yeah. One of our illegal logo mugs back when we didn't understand how trademarks work. Or to be more specific, our graphic artist didn't understand how trademark works. Several other questions. We'll take one more. We are going to go for, what is your starting point for space saving if I'm using always-on availability groups? And because each replica has to have its own copy of the database, is there any way to cut down on the amount of storage required, considering that I have production, development, staging, all these different environments? How do I cut my storage costs?
Compression.
Ooh, specifically what kind of compression?
Well, depends on what's in your tables. Page compression offers really good compression sort of across the whole spectrum of things. Row compression can sometimes buy you a little bit more. Again, depending on, I think that's good if like you have row is good if you have like car columns or something like that where you're actually not using all the space, and page is good for everything else. But it's been a while since I read up on that.
It's an enterprise edition feature, but who cares because you're using always-on availability groups.
Right. So that would be one way. The only thing is you're gonna compress all this stuff, and your data files are all still going to be the same size.
Storage compression would be good too. Dedupe at the storage level. So if you're using third-party storage, I say third-party storage. If you're using shared storage like Pure, EMC, EqualLogic, those can start doing deduplication at the storage layer as well. But man, I'll tell you what, my personal thought is, I don't know how big your databases are, but in our weekly links this past week, Intel is now shipping 2 terabyte PCI Express solid-state drives, 2 terabyte drives for $1,000. So that means you're going to put pairs of them in, but then you get 2 terabytes of mirrored storage for $2,000. That's a lot cheaper than a lot of development approaches that we're going to do, like having to change table design or stuff like that. Compression's easy, but...
Or you could just switch everything over to column store.
Switch everything to column store. I like it.
Get rid of your primary and foreign keys. Get rid of everything else. Just column store, column store, column store.
I hear Mongo's good for that.
SQL Server 2016 has the new compress command, compress and decompress. So what you could do is just have one XML column, and you just put everything in there and zip it every time you want to access it. And that is the end of our bad advice questions here for this week. Thanks,
You know what else
everybody,
is cool?
What else is cool?
You can make a computed column with compress. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. Oh, that's kind of nifty.
Yeah.
I like it. Now, I wonder... And there goes, the next time we get access to a live server. Fellow Human says, you guys rock. That's probably the best place for us to drop the mic and walk away. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging out with us this weekend. We will see you guys next week.
Goodbye.